So quick trivia for you guys. What does armpit hair from the Brussels sprout have in common with armpit hair from a tomato plant? If you guys aren't familiar with Roots and Refuge, Jess, she is really great on YouTube, making lots of videos about the home gardening and everything. I would be surprised if you haven't seen her, but I'm going to show a snippet of her video, a couple videos here. I have a couple questions. Okay, so first one was that trivia question. Next one is, I'm curious because I haven't been able to find it, but could Back to Eden gardening actually work in the South if their soils were boron sufficient or boron enough to be toxic to the ants and termites, but wonderful for us? Because you guys know I'm obsessed with boron, iodine, and fat-soluble vitamins, especially right now. Okay, and also, I was curious, I know that some of you aren't Christians, but to those that are, I'm curious about your thoughts about millennium versus not millennium. So I'll explain that later, and most of you already know what I'm talking about if you're a Christian. So yes, I'll show a snippet here.
Splashes.
Is it Brussels sprouts?
That is Brussels sprouts. Well done.
That's the Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, there's little babies.
Armpits. Brussels sprouts are armpit hair.
Brussels sprouts are armpit hair. I mean, you're not entirely wrong there. There's a growing in the armpits.
I was just taking some lettuce and kale and all these yummies to the preschool teacher of my daughter, Nayeli, and she had said that one time she was in the grocery store and she saw roots growing from her Brussels sprouts. It must have been like that they were harvested and they had just the right humidity and they just had the right moisture level. And I was like, wow. She's like, yeah, you can root the Brussels sprout right from where you cut it off of the the Brussels sprout plant.
My turn.
And she said it'll just grow right up just like a regular Brussels sprout plant. That's fascinating. So I knew I had to do that and include it in my garden of various store-bought produce that will produce for me. So I ripped off the armpit hair of this tomato and I put it right in the ground here the other day. And it's still happy. I'm gonna give it a little more water. Let it grow. So, if you guys haven't guessed yet, yes, the tomato plant is rootable by its little armpit hair, and so is the Brussels sprout. I knew about the tomato plant being able to do that, but I had no idea about the Brussels sprout, and that I find fascinating. I wanted to give you guys an update about those things that I put in the ground that were from my refrigerator. They are growing. So my potatoes are coming up, the ones that I planted Ruth Stout style, but also the potatoes that were in my refrigerator, of course, are starting to grow and reach for the sky. Potato plants are such a beautiful plant. Also, the celery is thriving. I've watered it profusely. Celery really loves water. I've watered it a lot. And then the Brussels sprouts seem to be taking root. When a plant gets more exposure to the sun, it starts to get darker green. When it's hidden, like the cabbage, when you pull apart the cabbage, it gets lighter and lighter because it's blanched. So when I pulled those layers off of that Brussels sprout, it was blanched, but I can see that it's starting to darken up. So that gives me an indication that, hey, this is doing something good. It's growing, it's alive, it's processing things. So I'm excited and encouraged that it is going to take root and start to push up and grow a little plant, a little Brussels sprout plant.
So anyway, link down below. Let's talk about ants. This is not sponsored whatsoever. I buy this product at the Home Depot or Walmart or Amazon. I think I ordered these on Amazon. I do not think that this is certified organic. I'll be completely frank with you. Ants are the one area that I am not doing things in a like purely organic fashion. Now, I don't buy purely organic seeds. If you are actually a certified organic grower, if you are paying for the government to call you organic, you have to buy organic seeds. You have to go through a lot of things that I don't go through. I'm not selling my produce. That doesn't matter to me. I grow it in such a way that I feel good about eating it. I'm actually moving this little ant house over here. You can kind of see some of that stuff coming out, and they'll start swarming it. This is called taro. I'll put a link to where I got it on Amazon, but you could find it at like your local, like Walmart or Home Depot or just wherever you go to the store. All right, they're swarming this, which is good. They're gonna get all of that gel stuff that's kind of leaking out. This one was sitting in another place. I actually opened it like 2 weeks ago or something like that. I tout the praises of organic gardening. Taro, I do not think that it is certified organic, as I said, but it is a natural product, which is basically boric acid in a suspension of like sugar water.
So the vast majority of the southern gardeners, the ones that are saying that Back to Eden gardening does not work at all, are the ones that are in the south. And there is a lot of termites and a lot of ants. And the only people that can answer this question are the people in the south who would be interested in doing a little experiment. So, and I have no idea what happens. I'm also curious because if you're a southern gardener, I also want to know, like, what does the termite do to it? Does it like take the wood and like go into the ground with it? Or does it turn it into new earth on top of the earth? Like, I think that would be a really awesome thing. But I'm just curious, like, what ends up happening? Like, it's digested material, or do they carry it off somewhere and like deep into the earth? That's a question that you guys can answer for me, because I have no idea. I haven't had to deal with any of termite issues at all.
Good for you. Figs, the top is 30. The next one below it, soybeans, and it's 12. Figs is over the top alkalizing. It's really major nutritious food. You know, it's interesting. You know, the creator who made all these wonderful foods for us, when he describes what it's going to be like when we end up in the last 1,000 years, it was all perfect. He mentions 2 fruits. And everyone will be under their own vine, grapes, and under their own fig tree. I think he's making a statement. Those fruits are really exceptionally nutritious.
So I'm just going to read this. gotquestions.com.org about Jesus. I know my pastor thinks that it's a great, solid place to look for questions. It says, what is the purpose of the 1,000-year reign of Christ? And I just want to see what they have to say here. What is the purpose of the 1,000-year reign of Christ? It says the millennium, also known as the Millennium Kingdom, is the 1,000-year reign of Jesus after the tribulation and before the great white throne judgment of the wicked. During the millennium, Jesus will reign as king over Israel and all the nations of the world, and over all the nations of the world. The world will live in peace. Satan will be bound, and at the beginning, everyone will worship God. The purpose of the 1,000-year reign is to fulfill the various promises God made to the world. Some of these promises, called covenants, were given specifically to Israel. Others were given to Jesus and the nations of the world and creation. Jesus' 1,000-year reign will be a time of promises kept. So there's different takes on it. But it says the Palestinian covenant, also called the land covenant. My daughter's looking for squirrels. God has already fulfilled the personal aspects of the Abrahamic covenant. Abraham did go to the promised land, he did have many descendants, and he is the forefather of many nations. Several hundred years after Abraham, Joshua led the Israelites to claim ownership of the promised land. But Israel has never possessed the specific boundaries that God promised in Genesis and Numbers. Not even Solomon ruled over this particular area, although he did reign from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates. He did not hold the area from Mount Hor to Hazarin into present-day Lebanon and Syria. In addition, the covenant of God, potential spam, made with Abraham was that he and his descendants would have the land forever. The current Israel state may be a step in this direction, but they still do not possess the boundaries God laid out. Okay, the Davidic covenant. God's covenant with David was that his line would never die out. That David's heir would sit on the throne of Israel forever. Biblical scholars agree that Jesus is the fulfillment of the covenant, one of the reasons his genealogy is given for both his adoptive father and his mother. The Jews understood this when they laid down palm branches and their cloaks as Jesus rode into Jerusalem. They expected him to be a military political leader that would liberate them from the Romans and make Israel a great nation again, but they didn't understand the nature of Jesus' work at that time was for the new covenant, not the Davidic covenant. The 1,000-year reign will be the beginning of Jesus' reign over Israel and the earth. The new covenant. The work of the new covenant, Jesus' death and resurrection to reconcile hearts to God, has been accomplished, but we have not yet seen the complete fulfillment. Jeremiah says, "But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." Gives more specifics. "You shall dwell in the land that I give to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I will be your God." Isaiah explains that the covenant is possible because of the Redeemer, and the reconciliation he provides will last forever. This covenant does not mean that every Jew will be saved, but it does mean that the Israel as a nation will worship their Messiah. The Old Testament prophets who spoke this covenant, including Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, and Ezekiel, all wrote that it will be fulfilled in the future. From their time on, Israel has yet to be an independent nation that worshipped its Messiah. They will be in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Other promises. Those are the covenants God made with Israel that are to be fulfilled in Jesus' 1,000-year reign, but the Bible lists other promises that will be fulfilled too. God promised Jesus will make his enemies a footstool, and that Jesus' followers will worship him freely. God promised the nations of the world that they would live in peace with Jesus as their ruler, and that he promised creation that the curse would be lifted. Animals and the earth would be restored to peace and prosperity, and people would be freed from disease. These two will be fulfilled during the 1,000-year reign. The main purpose of Jesus' 1,000-year reign is to fulfill the prophecies given to Israel and the promises made to Jesus, the nations, and the whole earth. God's covenants are voluntary and one-sided. He promised he would bless Israel and restore the world in specific ways, and he will. So it looks like GodAnswers.com believes in Millennium. So there are Christians that don't believe in this 1,000-year reign, and that it somehow is like inside of what we're living now, maybe. So I was just wondering your guys' thoughts on that.